Hello everyone. Hope you all are fine and doing well. In my previous video, we have learned something about Frederick Douglass's birth and as a slave, how he escaped from slavery, and he went to New York City, and there he got married to Anna Murray, right? And we have learnt about how these masters, slave masters, kept the slaves ignorant about their age, right? But this Frederick Douglass, he had heard about his age, that we have learnt, right? This much we had learnt in my previous video. In this class or in this video, we are going to learn about how the slave masters kept these slaves ignorant about their parentage too, right? In my previous video I have stopped the page number 90 and the very first paragraph I had stopped, that is, my mother was named Harriet Bailey. That is about Frederick Douglass's mother, and he knew the name of his mother, but she was the daughter of Isaac and Betsy Bailey, both color and quite dark. Yes, of course, both they were slaves. My mother was of darker complexion than either my grandmother or grandfather. Yes, this Harriet Bailey was a slave daughter, a slave child, we can say. So her complexion was quite darker than her grandmother or grandfather too, right? The Frederick Douglass' grandfather or grandmother too. That is about Frederick Douglass's mother. So most important is Frederick Douglass's father. Most important is this Frederick Douglass's father. See, this Frederick Douglass, as a slave, he was kept away, or he was kept ignorant about his parentage, because this Frederick Douglass was separated from his mother when he was an infant, right? When he was an infant, his mother was Betsy Harriet Bailey, that he knew. But what about his father? But he had heard that his father was a white man, and moreover, he was admitted to be such by all I ever heard speak of my parent age. Of course, this Frederick Douglass, he had heard about his parentage, that is, the white father or that white man or owner himself who was holding this slave, that is Frederick Douglass. His owner himself was his father, and his father was a white man. That white man was a slave holder, right? So that white man, he was father of Frederick Douglass, that he had heard. The opinion was also whispered that my master was my father. Right. There were other opinions too. And the opinion was the there was whisper, that is, his master or his owner himself was Frederick Douglass's father. But of the correctness of this opinion, I know nothing. The means of knowing was withheld from me. See how sad it is, right? The Frederick Douglass, he wanted to know about his parentage, but there was opinion that his master or that white man himself was his father. But to prove or for the correctness of that knowledge, okay, he wanted to know, but the thing was, the right of knowing about his parentage, it was withheld from him. It was withheld from him, right? So he did not know about his parentage. My mother and I were separated when I was but an infant, before I knew her as my mother. See, this Frederick Douglass and his mother, they were separated when that Frederick Douglass, just he was an infant. See, in the early stage itself, soon after the birth till 2 years, we consider that it is a infancy stage. So during that time only, that Frederick Douglass was separated from his mother. Before I knew her as my mother. So before this Frederick Douglass learned that his mother, or before he learned identifying his mother, he was separated from her, or these owners or masters, a white man. He separated this Frederick Douglass from his own mother. It's a common custom. Yes, see, there in the region of Maryland, it is a common custom, a practice in the part of Maryland from which I ran away. See, he born somewhere, and from Maryland he went to New York City, right? So there in the region of that Maryland itself, it was a dirty practice or common custom it is, right? A practice it was, that is separating a slave child from its mother in the early stage itself. It was common custom there, right? So in the same way, this Frederick Douglass was also separated from his very own mother. In the part of Maryland from which I ran away, to part children from their mothers at a very early age. Frequently, before the child has reached its 12th month, its mother is taken from it and hired out on some farm a considerable distance off, and the child is placed under the care of an old woman too old for field labor. See, in the early stage itself, during the infancy, the child or that slave child, it was separated from its mother, and the mother slave, it was hired by someone else, or that owner used to sell that mother slave to others, and that too the considerable distance that mother slave used to be sold, right? So like that, the slave child and slave mother, both they were separated in the early stage of the slave child itself, right? So like that, it was a common custom in the Maryland region. See, and after separating from slave mother, the slave child used to be under the care of an old woman or old slave who was not able to work in the field, right? Who was not able to work in the field. So their work was to take care of slave child who have been, or whom they had separated from their mother. So such slave children used to be under the care of old slaves who were not able to work in the fields. Like that, it was a common custom there in the region of Maryland. For what this separation is done, I don't know. I don't know nothing, unless it be to hinder the development of the child's affection toward its mother, and to blunt and destroy the natural affection of the mother for the child. This is the inevitable result. See, this Frederick Douglass, as a slave, he did not know for what reason these slave masters were separating the slave children from their own mother, right? So these slave children, they used to be separated from their mother, but this in the same way, this Frederick Douglass also was separated from his mother. But Frederick Douglass, he did not know for what reason they were being separated, or they were separating these slave children. So this Frederick Douglass in the same way was separated from his mother during infancy, and after that he was under the care of an old woman, right? So that practice they had just to blunt, or just to disturb or destroy that attachment towards their mother. So it is common custom that every child or slave child is to be separated from its mother, just to blunt, right? Blunt or destroy, or just to remove or detach the child, they used to do it, right? They used to separate the slave child. It was common custom there. So this Frederick Douglass also, he was separated from his mother in his early stage itself. So it was inevitable result for him. So whom to ask about his father, right? Whom to ask about his father? Because these slaves did not know about their mother, and before knowing, these slave children used to be separated, right? Like that, the Frederick Douglass also was separated from his mother. And next one, leave that mother. And about father, if mother is not there, and then how can they inquire about father, right? So like that, they were separated from their parents. It was common custom there in the region of Maryland. As a result, the Frederick Douglass did not know about their parentage and the age. I never saw my mother to know her as such more than 4 or 5 times in my life, and each of these times was very short in duration and at night. See, it is very horrible. It is extremely bad, or we can say that sorrowful, because a slave child is being separated from its mother, okay, and that too in the early stage itself. And this slave, especially this Frederick Douglass, he had seen his mother only 4 or 5 times in his life. He had seen his very own mother only for 4 to 5 times, right? So here we can understand that how they were disturbing or destroying the attachment between slave mother and slave child. And each of these times was very short in duration and at night. See, he had met his mother only 4 to 5 times in his life, but that too for a shorter duration, only for little duration he had met her. And that too he is very clear about the duration and the time, right? So he used to meet his own mother, that too in the night. Why in the night, and why for shorter duration itself, right? That we are going to know now. She was had by a Mr. Stewart who lived about 12 miles from my home. So this Frederick Douglass's mother, she was hired by Mr. Stewart, right? Mr. Stewart was a slave master. So this Mr. Stewart was a slave master. So he had bought Frederick Douglass's mother, and he was 12 miles away from Frederick Douglass's home. She made her journey to see me in the night, traveling the whole distance on foot after the performance of her day's work. See, this attachment, even after being separated, that mother slave used to come to see her son in the night, and that too barefooted and by walk. So that owner or the white man, or the master who had owned Frederick Douglass's mother, he was 12 miles away from Frederick Douglass. And to see Frederick Douglass, this Frederick Douglass's mother used to come there by walk. She made her journey to see me in the night, that too in the night, traveling the whole distance on foot, that too foot by walk, right? Barefooted after the performance of her day's work. Yes, see the condition. After the performance, after the completion of the day's work, the mother slave used to come to see her own son, right? So the slaves, they had to complete their work in the daytime, and they had to walk miles together, and that too in the night they had to come and see their children, and they must go back. It was the condition, right? So like that, the things or practice was there in the region of Maryland. So let's go ahead. She was a field hand, and a whipping is the penalty of not being in the field at sunrise, unless a slave has special permission from his or her master to the contrary, a permission which they seldom get, and one that gives to him that gives it the proud name of being a kind master. See, the Frederick Douglass's mother was a field hand. She was working in the field, or she was labor in the field. And After seeing the Frederick Douglass, she had to rush back or run back to her master's place, because whipping, it was the penalty of not being in the field, that too at sunrise. Because if they spend time there with their children, it would be difficult for them to return to their place, and they wouldn't go in time to the field. If they wouldn't go in time to the field, definitely slave masters would whip them. So whipping was a penalty for being late to the field, unless a slave had special permission from his or her master to the contrary, a permission which they seldom get, and one that gives to him, that gives it the proud name of being a kind master. Usually the slave masters is not to allow the slave mothers to go and see their children. But some masters, kind masters, they used to allow these slave mothers to go and see their children. Such masters used to get the title or the proud name, that is a kind master. So like that, there was chance of proving that they were kind in this way. Right? So next one, I do not recollect of ever seeing my mother by the light of day. But he do not know, or he don't remember, or he had never met his mother in the daytime or by the light of day. This Frederick Douglass himself, he had never met his mother in the daytime. Right? See here on the screen, that is, a slave is being whipped by his master. See, that one who is whipping, that is a white man, whereas that to the pillar, or we can see a person being tied to a pillar and being whipped. Right? That is slave here. So here this is slave, and here this is slave master. Right? How this slave master is whipping, in the same way, in the place of this man, that woman would be tied and whipped by the white man himself. Like that the situation was. So this Frederick Douglass, he knew nothing. He knew nothing about this parentage. And on the screen, we can see how the slave masters are whipping the slaves or punishing the slaves. See here how this slave is being whipped, right? The slave master and this slave is being whipped here. And another one, the slave master is whipping a slave here. See how slaves are being whipped, right? They used to tie them, right? And with the help of kajal means in Kannada what we say, that is barkolu, right? So with the help of that, they used to whip them. Like that they used to punish the slaves. And another one, see, it is not a punishment, but to identify their slaves. But to identify their slaves, they used to go for branding. So our own kind, our own brothers and sisters, they were being branded like this. See, here master is putting seal on the back of a slave. Right? See here. Right? This picture shows that how slave branding used to take place. And another one, this is master, and he is putting a seal on the back of a slave. And it is not only for one slave, it is for all the slaves whom he had owned. Like that they used to go for slave branding. And another one, to prevent slaves from escape, they used to have this method. See, they used to have this method, right? So if they are escaping, definitely they would catch them, or they could identify the slaves, right? So for that reason they used to have them like this, right? So let us go to next one. Discusses the meager food and clothing allowance given to slaves. So it is not there in the text, Children from 7 to 10 years old of both sexes, almost naked, might be seen all seasons of the year. So those might be seen all seasons of the year, that too naked. So how to protect themselves for the environment? Just imagine children fed cornmeal mush from a tuff on the ground like pigs. See, it is not common food also, right? The children were fed cornmeal, cornmeal mush from a trough on the ground like pigs, like animals. They were treating the slaves like animals, right? So, like that, the things were in the slavery. So here we have seen how the punishment used to be given to slaves. So these slave mothers used to rush back to their owner's place just to escape the punishment, or just to escape from the punishment, or to not to pay or not to get the penalty, that is whipping. So this Frederick Douglass, he had never seen his mother during light of day, that is daytime. She was with me in the night. Yes, of course, that slave mother used to be there, or Frederick Douglass's mother used to be there with him, that too in the night, but not for longer time, for shorter time, or short time she used to be there. She would lie down with me and get me to sleep, but long before I wake, she was gone. See how sad it is. See how sad it is. The slave mother coming to see her son, okay, and that too for shorter duration or shorter time. She used to spend time with that kid, slave child, okay, and after that, that slave mother used to lie down with the slave, and she used to get me to sleep. She used to get that slave to sleep, but long before I wake, she was gone, because she used to get up early and she used to return to her master's place or field, because whipping was penalty for being late to the field, right? So they used to rush back to their place. Very little communication ever took place between us. So very little conversation had taken place between Frederick Douglass and his mother. Death soon ended what little we could have while she lived, and with it her hardships and suffering too. See, death soon ended what little we could have while she lived. Yes, see, while that slave mother was alive, this Frederick Douglass, he could feel that someone was coming to see him and showering the care. Right, someone was there for him, but that little was also taken away by God with the death, or after her death, he lost everything, right? And with it, her hardships. So that when that time the death ended that relationship or that sweet experience, along with that her hardships or whatever she had faced, right, that also, or and her suffering also, those were dead with that woman, right? So death had ended not only the life of that slave woman, but her hardships and sufferings too. She died when I was about 7 years old. See that Frederick Douglass's mother, she passed away when he was 7 years old. Please do underline that when Frederick Douglass was 7 years old, his mother had passed away, right? He lost his mother when he was 7 years old, and when he was an infant he was separated from his mother. Both you must remember. On one of my master's farm near Lee's Mill, I was not allowed to be present during her illness, at her death or burial. See that Frederick Douglass's mother, she died, right? She was not well or unwell, or she was ill. She died when I was about 7 years old. When Frederick Douglass was 7 years old, she fell ill and she died. And he was, as a son, he was not allowed to be with his mother, just for being a slave child. So this Frederick Douglass was not allowed to be with his mother there during her illness or at her death. right, or burial. At least these are the final rites a man has to discharge in his life. But just for being a slave, Frederick Douglass had did not have all these in his life. She was gone long before I knew anything about it. See, even the news, right? So news of the death of Douglas's mother, it did not reach Frederick Douglass, right? After so many days or so many years, we can say that Frederick Douglass learned that his mother had passed away, never having enjoyed to any considerable extent her soothing presence, her tender and watchful care. I received the tidings of her death with much the same emotions I should have probably felt at the death of a stranger. See, the Frederick Douglass, he did not have that kind of attachment towards his mother, right? He did not have that kind of attachment towards his mother. So the Frederick Douglass felt the death of his very own mother like stranger's death. So he did not have any emotions like that, right? So probably he had felt the death of a stranger. Yes, of course, because throughout his life, in the 7 years, he had met his very own mother, that too 3 to 5 times, right? He had met her only 3 to 5 times, that too during night, and that too for a shorter duration. And she used to come, see, and she used to lie with him, and she used to get him sleep, and she used to leave the place, right? Only that little conversation they used to have, but the death had taken away that those beautiful moments too. So the death of his very own mother, he felt that it was a death of a stranger. He did not get any emotions like that, because there was no bonding between Frederick Douglass's mother and Frederick Douglass. Like that, the slavery was being practiced, or it was held there in the region of Maryland, and the slaves were treated like this. Called thus suddenly away, she left me without the slightest intimation of who my father was. Yes, at the age of 7, he lost his mother, and she left him without telling him, or she left him without making him know about his who was his father. So that is slightest intimation of who my father was. So like that, Frederick Douglass had lost chance of knowing about his father too, right? If mother was there with him, he could have asked, but that mother he had met only 4 to 5 times in his life, that of a shorter duration and in the night. So Frederick Douglass, he did not get any chance to ask about his father. So now she had passed away. So he did not know anything about who was his father. The whisper that his master was my father. Yes, there was whisper. That is, his master was his father. So that was a opinion, or there was a whisper. May or may not be true. Yes, he is telling that it may be or may not be true. And true or false. It may be true or false. Right? He don't know anything about his parentage. It is of but little consequences to my purpose, whilst the fact remains in all its glaring odiousness that slaveholders have ordained and by law established that the children of slave women shall in all cases follow the condition of their mothers, and this is done too obviously to administer to their own lusts and make a gratification of their wicked desires profitable as well as pleasurable. For by this cunning arrangement, the slaveholder, in cases not a few, sustains to his slaves the double relation of master and father. Yes, now here we have learnt about the Frederick Douglass parentage, and remaining I speak in the next video. So till now, whatever I have taught, you might have understood. Hope you have understood this, and I'll be continuing in my next class. I stop here. Thank you.